So hello, hope everybody's well out there. So the Marauder, been in the pipeline for a while, like most of my projects, sit there gathering dust and I'll get around to them at some point. But I wanted to bring something different to this build, because I think once you've seen one or two builds, why would you want to watch another one? So I was hoping that with adding crew internally, as well as the overall silver scheme, which I know some people avoid, 172, 148 is manageable. When it gets to the bigger scales, a bit like the BAC Lightning I did and the Dornier Arrow, it gets a bit more tricky. Like anything with a larger scale, it's very hard to hide any mistakes. Not that I'm saying there's no mistakes in this build with the Marauder. And the other premise was to add a bit more grime to the surface, especially after looking at some really good references. But at the end of the build, I didn't go as far as I thought I'd like to. There was a certain point where you think that's enough, and you think if I go a bit further, I could ruin what I've already got there. The amount of times I've built models and I've done things and I wish I could do a Control-Z. I wish I hadn't gone down that road or done that. So I got to a point that I was happy with, reasonably happy with. Personally, I mean, let me know in the comments, I think grime scales, like colour does sometimes. The smaller the scale, the less grime you need without it looking too much. The other thing I wanted to do was to make sure that the props go around were movable. So in the final photographs, you've got some motion there. And it's weird, of all the problems I could have anticipated, the one that cropped up was the last thing on my mind. So I'm there with the wife's hairdryer, not mine, of course. With the homemade stand that I made for it, and what I hadn't anticipated with the hairdryer going was the flexibility of the stand and the wobbling Marauder. Perhaps if I'd have used brass rod or aluminium rod, it'd have been a bit more sturdier, because the attachment to the Marauder to the top of the stand was solid, but everything else wobbled. And of course, in the final photographs, there was a lot of blurriness. So I had to change quite a few settings. So in the final photographs, I've taken some without the props, no movement whatsoever, so you get a better look at the surface detail. And then for the final ones, it does lose that subtlety because of the camera speed. Ron Waffle there, everybody. I've got a funny feeling you may see him again at some point. So this could be the last build for the holidays coming up. But what I had thought was trying to revamp some of the old builds that I did that I unlisted. Perhaps tidy them up, clean them up, some new photographs, new vocals. I don't know yet. I'm going to try and look at and see whether I can salvage anything from the old videos, because some of them are quite old. And if I can do that, I shall pop one in before the holidays. Because otherwise it could be the end of January before another full build comes up. So I think I've covered everything. I'm sure I've missed something. Let me know in the comments anyway, if there's anything you want to know. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you later. So here we are, and I'm sure we've all seen this beautiful box art many times on the screen, but it is a first for me. I'm also going to be adding some figures to this Marauder, giving it some life, and I'm going to be using these two sets. Now this one I've used before on the Tamiya P47 build. So let's have a quick look in the box. Now most of you will have seen all this in great detail elsewhere and everywhere. So I'll just give a quick overview for the major parts. You can skip to the build just by looking at the counter at the top here. One thing I've noticed is the lack of rivets. Let me know if you think that's a good thing. So the first thing I've done, before I forget, because I will, is drill out the holes for the side armaments. So I'm going to build as much as I possibly can without the paint process being hindered. By the by, unless I haven't said, I don't think I have, I'm going to be building this in flight. So there'll be no undercarriage, no legs required. How I'm going to show that, I don't know yet. So I'm just going to stop and comment on some of the areas that need attention so far. The 4 side guns, the housings, the parts were a very bad fit. Also the rear tail has sink marks along the trailing edge. Some of the areas of the instructions weren't very clear. Here on the Northern bomb site, it looks like it should be placed on this hole, but I ended up attaching it on this lug here. I've also taken off the rear lights and replaced them with plastic rods. The landing lights need some attention as well. These are no good. Now the cowls have a number of parts to them, and with that I had some fit issues. Once again, it could have been me. So time has passed and I'll go through the parts that I've built up. And because I'll be showing this in flight, the landing gear will not be needed. One less thing to build and paint. So all the tailplane assemblies and the course control surfaces have all been built. And these all fit very nicely, by the way. I'm still deciding whether to have the bomb bay doors open or closed. There is a part of me that wants to have both options. Interchangeable? We shall see. And these are the door parts assembled for the open position. So some of the cockpit assembled, and I may add a bit more now I've got a better feel for this area. It's all about how easy it is to paint and add washes and highlights to these assembled areas. The bomb bay parts, I was going to leave these parts unglued, but I couldn't resist assembling them. A very nice fit, to the fuselage as well. Main piece here is a turret, and because I'm going to be adding a figure here, hopefully, I'll need to see how he fits in here before I add in any more parts. Pilot seat. Centre console, I'm still waiting for the control panel replacement set that I've ordered. So I'll be waiting for that before I take any of this beautiful surface detail off, just in case I change my mind or I don't like the set. Next we have both engines. Quite a lot is going on here, and it's a shame that most of it will be all covered up. So I've glued the main pistons that come in 2 parts, always very tricky to clean up, especially around those vanes. Thankfully, most of the sides will not be visible. So I could do more assembly on the engines, but I want to paint the parts individually, so I need to see what colours they are first. And I'm going to paint the cowls as well. I'll get to the cowls in a minute. The fuselage halves, and you can see where I've closed the doors up. I've given them some support around the edges here, because I don't want them giving way when I start sanding. The gunner's doors fit reasonably well. You could show these in the open position. The side frames are there to do that. I can't believe this part is still hanging on. I can guarantee I'll catch it right at the very end. So I started on the wings and I've glued some of the undercarriage leg structure. Why not? The landing lights, I need to have something a bit more dazzling here. Lastly, the nacelles. These parts went together very well. The exhausts, I needed a bit of trimming on the lugs just to get them to fit within that shroud. These assemblies fit very well onto the wing. Very little work is going to be needed here, if at all. One thing I should have done that I completely forgot about was adding the undercarriage doors to the nacelle parts before closing them up. The doors are going to be very tricky to add at this stage. Never mind. The biggest issue I had, and I think I've mentioned this before, were the cowl parts, especially the top 2 parts. They weren't a good fit. So I struggled with these, and a lot of work was needed to get these to fit, and of course with sanding and cleaning up around here I lost a lot of detail. The cowl fit to the nacelle will need some work, but not too much. Not a lot. So I'm keen to add paint, but before I can do that I need to see about those figures. sort them out and get to fit and sit properly in their relevant areas. I think I've accounted or will show 4 figures, the 2 pilots, the bomb aimer and the guy in the turret. So I'm going to try and accomplish that with the 2 sets I've got. Of course the 2 pilots should be easy. The rear gunner, you will hardly see him in there if I was to put him in there. That's my excuse anyway, so I should be leaving him out. He sits quite far back. He sits behind this plate, if I can find it. Here it is. So it looks like the rear gunner was safely tucked behind all this lot. So let's get on with that. I've just had the upgrade for the panel set arrive. Looks better than anything I can do, but we'll look at them in a bit more detail later on. So I'm going to start with the pilots and see how they fit. What? That's strange, the bomb sight's just fallen off. That's worrying. It's as if I haven't used any glue on it. Hope the rest of the kit stays glued. I'm worried. No, seriously, I'm worried. Back to the figure. So I'm going to do some small cuts around his feet, and I think that's all that's needed. So with both figures glued and built to be seated in their ICM seats, I couldn't help but notice they look strangely stretched, or they've got smaller heads. Slender men flying a Marauder. I need to get on with the gunner and maybe the bomb aimer. I'm hoping that I can cannibalise something from this set. This set, by the way, is very good. So I'm hoping Dr. Frankenstein will have nothing on me. So I'm going to start with the gunner. So you can see I've had to cut his legs off for him to fit. I wasn't happy with the headgear. I had a number of ideas of cutting heads off and hats and what have you, but that sounded more effort than it was worth. A lot of faff. So I've just cut his arms to make him seat in the right position. So the gunner is done, missing some of the major equipment, or might not look right with his headgear, but he'll have to do. Same for the bomb aimer, a lot of cut and shut around here. I was deciding whether to change some of the headgear. Once again, a lot of faff, but I did need to indicate that there was somebody in the front of the nose here. So he's not ideal, I just have to live with it. There is a chair behind him which I assume was fold down when using the bomb sight, as well as the gun stowed to one side. The engine is my attention next, and I decided to add some cabling, some harnesses, which means drilling a lot of holes everywhere. So I'm using fuse wire here, and although the 5 amp, the 0.2mm is a bit thin, 0.3 and 0.4 would have been better thickness. But I don't have that size to hand. So I've rolled the wire flat and then cut into 2 different lengths. Each hole will take 2 bits of cut wire. So here are my 2 spiders, and I hope I've left enough length to trim back. I had considered using lead wire, but I'm not wasting good wire on these engines. The cost was a factor as well. 99p for the fuse wire packet. Bargain. So let's get on and start painting these engines. All toothpicked up, and I'll paint the inner cowls as well. I think most modelers would have assembled more before adding paint, but each modeler to their own. The base coat added, I'll pick out all that detail by dry brushing and washes. It's always in the back of my mind that most of this work is not going to be seen. So for the interior green, so I've mixed these 2 colours until I've arrived at the green that's shown in the photographs. Now, yes, I know you take everything that's shown in photographs with a pinch of salt, especially museum pieces. So I've sealed everything with a satin varnish, but I still need to add certain effects to certain areas. While I had the green in the pot, I went mad and painted all the other parts. So let's get these built. Now here I'm replacing the prop spindle with one of my own. So the harnesses are next, and there are a couple more to add, if I can be bothered. These wires will be trimmed down first, and I know that I've got a lot to play with. And I'm just going to brighten up the engine area by adding this colour to the harnesses. These wires will also get a coat of gloss. Now the manifolds, I had a lot of trouble here, not the most confident fix. And then pairing the engine assembly up to the nacelle didn't fill me with confidence. So I think I'm going to leave these off. I don't think you're going to see a lot of them anyway, if at all. So onto the panel set. It also comes with some harnesses that look very nice. So I can go ahead and remove the paint and take all that nice surface detail off the kit parts. Now before I can add these, I need to show off that interior detail with washes and highlights. Now I made a schoolboy error here in dry brushing silver on the surface detail. Now for me, I only dry brushed silver on a black background, nothing else. So I should have either used a buff or a deck tan, like I have here on the turret. But because not much is going to be seen when we close the fuselage halves up, I can live with it. I'm going to add my Tamiya panel mix next. So with the panel wash added and the figures finished, I hate painting figures, we're almost ready to close up and hide all this. So I completely forgot about the bombs, maybe because I was still considering whether to show them or not. There's nothing worse than painting armament. So the bomb's painted. I'm just going to be using strips of Tamiya tape around the end here. Far easier, and will do a far better job than I can. I just do want to mention about the attachment points on the bombs to their frames or the racks. They're very weak. Clear parts next. And I didn't enjoy cleaning up some of the tabs off some of the clear parts. So you've got to be careful with that sanding file when cleaning up. So let's add these 3D decals. You treat them like decals. Now, I had a lot of trouble with these. As soon as I added them, they sat okay, and then within seconds they start to curl up. So I pressed them down again, which worked for so long, and then they curled up again. Now it says you can use PVA glue, which didn't really work because PVA glue takes a while to dry, so they still curled up. So in frustration, I used super glue, which went down like diarrhea in a spacesuit. I don't want to show you the end results. They're very poor effort on my behalf. In the end, what I ended up doing is cutting the panel out with the backing paper still on, and then glued them with PVA glue. My train of thought was that with the backing paper would glue better than that smooth surface of the 3D decal. So I've left these overnight and they're still attached. They'll probably fall off when I close up the fuselage halves. I'll get on with the rest. Let's glue these bombs onto those weak attachment points. Now, because I'm going to be showing this in flight, I need some sort of attachment point for some sort of stand that I'm going to build at some point. So I've added this tube, and I need to add a bit more support around here just to give it some strength. A bit like this. Now I'm going to add the rear gun later. By the way, the Northern bomb sight fell off again. Very strange. So what I did was ended up pinning it. If it falls off again, stuff it. So I've added a bit of sparkle to replace that naff detail we had. The wings are next, and the port wing fitted a tree. Beautiful. But the starboard one needed a bit of trimming around the front. I've glued the wings separately. Just needs a little bit of force to close that slight gap. Other than that, a beautiful fit. There should be no filler or sanding required around here. Now I glued the clear nose part on, only to end up cutting it free. Typical though, innit? It was a beautiful fit. Reason why I did this is because there was some strapping inside, straps, bracing, whatever you want to call it, that needed painting internally. Read the instructions, Greg. Now I've made a copy of the mask template rather than cut up the original, just in case I need to go back to it for whatever reason. So the mask's applied, and over the base coat I've added a matte aluminium. The colour is very patchy, by the way. I didn't want an even blanket cover. That's my excuse anyway. I know it looks bad, but we've got a long way to go yet. So I've been away for a week and a bit, and I'm going to try and bring this surface to life somehow. And I'm going to start with that anti-glare area on the nose. I'm going to add a light colour first, and then a darker one. By doing this, once it's thoroughly dry, I can give it a light sand and break through to that lighter colour underneath. Now I was considering taking the canopy masks off, as there's going to be no more airbrush work needed now, from here on. So to create that well-worn surface, I've got several options. I've got pencil lead, Vallejo, even varnishes. Then I have these that I wouldn't really airbrush on, I'd brush on. Some that will buff up, and of course I've got the obligatory oils. And finally, my favourite weapon, the foam back sanding pad. So I'm going to start with the Vallejo paint first, and I've created a grey wash. I'm going to apply this all over the surface willy-nilly. Now it will bead, so I will need to add a bit of mild detergent to get this wash to sit on the surface. Now you could add a darker grey, a white, or any colour you want to the surface to add as a texture while the surface is still wet. I'm just getting rid of some of the brush strokes here. So this is what it looks like when it's all dried. Next is to pick out some panels with a darker colour wash. So it's time to sand the surface with a dry rub, no water involved, but very lightly. And if I need to afterwards, I'm not happy with it, I can apply a bit more pressure. Gently first. So you can see I'm bringing some of the surface off. So I'm just going to try with a bit more pressure. That's looking better. So I've created some artwork for masks to be cut out. These will also help me in the aid of positioning. The first thing I'm going to paint is these green-grey areas. Now I haven't a clue what they are, or even the colour, to be quite honest with you. It seems to be a very well-worn olive drab. And it seems to be over the wings as well. And I don't know whether it goes underneath the wing as well. So I'll try and transpose these worn areas, information, from the artwork to the model surface with a pencil. Same thing with the wing, although I'm not full of confidence around this area. Too many unanswered questions. Hopefully I can hide most of it all with the grime. So the green areas are masked off, and I'm going to use these two colours to create a mix, and once again with a very small amount of detergent. So let's just slap this on and hope for the best. It's probably going to take 2 or 3 coats. Now dry, then I can mark off the stripes. I'll use this colour first. And then a white over the top. Now I'm applying it haphazardly. I don't want a solid colour, hence the use of the brush. So I've jumped ahead because I was so excited and added the black, which looking at photographs seems a bit more solid, a little less worn, especially underneath. So hopefully I can soften and blend and fade some of this paintwork with a bit of sanding. I'm dry sanding here very lightly, no water involved. I don't really want to go down to the silver if I can help it, although it's not the end of the world. So it's okay, and I can always come back to it with some more Vallejo washes later. Let's get on with the wings. So the mask here applied is only to help guide my brushwork with the tan colour. Once that paint is dried, I'll take the tape off. Next I'm added a thin down Vallejo white. The black is applied in the same way, but once again looks a lot denser on the photographs. The paint on the wing will be left to dry before giving the stripes a light sanding. The first mask is added for the outline that follows around the code letters and the stars and bars. I think it's silver, but I've used the light grey instead. Then the grey is masked off and I've used the Vallejo German grey for the black, as I think using solid black is too harsh. So any areas on this Marauder that are black, I've used the German grey. Now the X2 I cocked up here big time. For whatever reason, I brought the silver outline inwards on it. It was only after I peeled off the mask and cross-referenced it with the photograph that dough moment happened. It could, and with a bit of effort, be put right. It's not the end of the world. I could have hand painted it or made another mask, but working with the Tamiya big masking sheets is a nightmare. Not the same material as the tape you get in the roll. It really does stick like shit to a blanket, and when you try and peel it off, even gently, it tears. Nightmare stuff. But I'd rather watch a painted wall dry. So all that effort and I can't get the basics right. There's something to be said about the convenience of decals. I'll look at them in a different light now. It was at this point I seriously considered adding the decal stars and bars, especially looking at my not so perfect cut circle here. So while I'm toying with that thought, I'll make a start on the rear tail masks. I'll add a light yellow first and then a dark yellow, once again just in case I want to sand it back and give that worn look. So the serial number mask added, and the cutout looks very good on the board. I'm quite impressed. But it might be another story when I add the paint against the silver on that tail. So they say fortune favours the brave. Maybe. I'm going to use the mask for the stars and bars. So I'm just going to use pencil lead with a wet finger so I can see the cuts. So I'm going to apply this mask first so I can get the position right, and then I'll apply the outside mask. Blue first, and I'm using these two colours for the blue. It's strange, it was only at this point I realised I'm still using Vallejo paints, and the trouble with that is that the Vallejo paint is not happy being sanded as a solid colour. As a wash, yes. Then onto the white. While all that was drying, I was painting the anti-glare on the cowls. On here I'm also going to apply a wash to the silver. And then before it dries, I'm just going to roll it off with a baby bud and then left to dry thoroughly. And then once again, I'll give it a light sand in one direction. So there's still plenty of work to do on the surface with acrylic washes before adding any oils. One thing I have been itching to do is to pick out some of this surface detail with some watercolours. So I'm adding a dark grey mix here, which is quite thick. Now watercolour is very forgiving and you can easily remove it, no issues whatsoever. So with that wash dry thoroughly, it's just a matter of wiping off with a damp cloth. So easy. So for now, I want to get on with those oils, and I'm just going to stick to these three colours: burnt umber, lamp black, and a little yellow ochre. So there are no quick results for this, it just takes time and patience. Must remember that with the tape in the way, the wash will always look lighter. So I always need to peel it back just to make sure it hasn't gone too dark. So I prep the surface with a light coat of odourless thinner, not too much. Very little is needed here. And then with the oil tone already mixed beforehand, I'm just applying small amounts just to start with. A good piece of reference is always a help. Blimey, I'm bored already. And there's a long way to go. Then for the other side, I'm applying a lighter umber mix first. Then if I feel it needs it, I'll apply a darker black mix later. So onto the main unattached doors, and I felt that the surface needed a Vallejo whitewash first, and once that was thoroughly dried, I've masked off and I've created some frame braces. In hindsight, I wish I'd have scribed this detail in. It would have been much easier. Once again, a light mix first, and then onto a darker one. So I've jumped ahead, the foam was getting in the way and I needed to get close and personal. Next I need to add a darker oil over the top of this, but mindful that I don't need to go as far as the burnt umber application. So once again, I'm going to do this off camera as I only get one chance at this. I'm going to add the control surfaces so I can finish off with the oils. So onto the cowls and engines next, and I thought I'd have trouble with these two assemblies because that green frame around the engine, after dry fitting it didn't seem to fall into place, but with slight pressure it fitted okay. So one problem I've been having when fanning about with the surfaces is the oil underneath. It's still not quite dry yet. So when working on the top, I keep marking the oil underneath. So I've come up with this to keep the Marauder off the surface. So I just need to add the cowls and a few little parts, and then finally the props. Now the props I haven't weathered, I've kept them in solid colours. The train of thought is that when they're going round, that solid colour will show better. I just need to make that stand. There's always something else to do. So I hope you like what I've done with this. So I want to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you for the next build, whenever that is. See you later.